If you will make a study of the life and work of Lee Kuan Yew, you will find one of the most interesting and instructive political stories written in the history of mankind. This is better than Athens, this is an unbelievable history. And you will learn a lot that will be useful in your own life. Study the life and work of Lee Kuan Yew. You're going to be flabbergasted. My favorite political system in terms of being adapted to its particular circumstances successfully is Singapore. I think Singapore is the single most successful governmental system that exists in the world. They've taken a small swamp from no to a very creditable place. They're doing the Lord's work in a number of very important ways. Singapore's habit of stepping hard on things that will grow like cancer is the correct way to govern. And in America, we tend to wait till they're unfixable and then we want to fix them. If you won't attack a problem while it's solvable and wait till it's unfixable, you can argue that you're so damn foolish that you deserve the problem. If you want to study, you take Singapore. A terrible malaria problem. It's a swamp. He drains the swamps. He does not care if some little fish dies. No. He has a drug problem. He searches the world over for the right solution to the drug problem. He finds it in the United States. Isn't that an interesting thing? Imagine somebody in Singapore reading books and deciding the United States was the answer to Singapore's problem. He copied the military's drug bottle policy. That anybody in Singapore will pee in a bottle instantly on demand, and if they flunk, they go immediately to a tough compulsory rehab. Away went the drug problem. Just time after time after time, he made these winning decisions. He wanted the place to be prosperous. He figured out who he wanted to come in, and he made the civilization very user-friendly to what he wanted to attract. And it worked. Then, it's 70% Chinese and 30% Malay. And every Chinese thinks that the Chinese are superior to the Malays. And he thinks that's terribly counterproductive if anybody should ever say so. So he passes a law. You can't say if you're Chinese in Singapore that you think there's any superiority in the Chinese. I think that's a very sensible law for Singapore to have. But of course it has some infringement of free speech. But anyway, just time after time after time, he's done this thing. His approach to marriage was interesting. The average very successful man in the Asian culture marries an exceptionally good-looking woman who's somewhat dumber than he is. This is the system. Well, this guy was so smart that he was the second-ranked school student in his high school. And the student that was 1/10 of a percentage point higher was female. So he didn't follow the Asian rule of hiring the beautiful woman with the big boobs, who's a little dumber than you are. He married this woman that was 1/10 of a point higher. And who is now the Prime Minister of Singapore? Their son. I mean, this is a very unusually successful man. It's a very unusually successful history. Lee Kuan Yew had the best record as a nation builder. If you're willing to count small nations in the group, he had probably the best record that ever existed in the history of the world. He took over a malarial swamp with no army, no nothing. And pretty soon, he turned that into this gloriously prosperous place. And his method for doing it was so simple. You know, the mantra he said over and over again, it's very simple. He said, figure out what works and do it. Now, it sounds like anybody would know that made sense. But, you know, most people don't do that. They don't work that hard at figuring out what works and what doesn't. And they don't just keep everlastingly at it the way he did. Again, he was a very smart man. He had a lot of good ideas, and he absolutely took over a malarial swamp and turned it into modern Singapore in his own lifetime. It was absolutely incredible. And he did not have, it was a one-party system, but he could always be removed by the electorate. He was not a dictator. And he was just so good. He was death on corruption, which was a very good idea. And in fact, there's hardly anything he touched he didn't improve. When I look at modern Singapore health system, it costs 20% of what the American system costs. And of course, it works way better than our medical system. And that's entirely due to the practical talent of Lee Kuan Yew. Just time after time, he would choose the right system. And in Singapore, you get a savings account the day you're born. And if you don't spend the money, you and your heirs get to spend it eventually. In other words, it is your money. So that to some extent, everybody buying medical service in Singapore is paying for it himself. And of course, people behave more sensibly when they're spending their own money. He just, time after time, he would do something like that recognized reality and worked way better than what other people were doing. And there aren't that many people like Lee Kuan Yew that have ever lived. So of course I admire him. I have a bust of Lee Kuan Yew in my house. I admire him that much.